My name is Kaitlin, and I am a registered behavior technician here at Fox Behavior Group. I am also a graduate student at Ball State University working towards becoming a BCBA. Today, I wanted to create a presentation for you on how to conduct a preference assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and, there we go. Did that quicker than I thought I would. Turn it into a slideshow. All right, so we're going to learn how to conduct a preference assessment. So the first question you definitely should ask is, what is a preference assessment? A preference assessment is conducted in order to create a hierarchy of stimuli. Stimuli is just a fancy word for items. A phone is a stimuli. My Coke is a stimuli. Other examples would be toys, snacks, stuff that would be more fitting for, the learners that we work with. Typically, they are stimuli that a learner you may already know prefers, or it may be stuff that you want to test out and see if they prefer it. We are going to do this in order to determine what can be used as an effective reinforcer. All right, so what is the difference between a preference assessment and a reinforcer assessment? I always got these two mixed up, so I wanted to make a slide that way that we could clarify for all of you guys as well. So preference assessment tests the learner's interest in objects and activities to identify potential reinforcers. So a preference assessment would ideally be conducted before a formal reinforcer assessment. A reinforcer assessment measures the effects of utilizing those items and activities as reinforcers. So a preference assessment will be the first step, and then a reinforcer assessment will be the second step. Oops, there we go. There's a lot of information on this page, so I'm going to go through it and just summarize it shortly. So ultimately, there are 5 different preference assessments. They all are naturalistic, free operant observations, successive choice, forced choice, multiple stimulus with replacement, and then the last one is multiple stimulus without replacement. So naturalistic free operant observation, goodness, it's a mouthful. That is when you would observe the learner and then know exactly how they're allocating their time. So for example, you could be in a classroom and observing a client and noticing, which items they're leaning towards and how much time they're spending with that exact item or activity. Next, we have successive choice, and that is when the stimulus is presented and the person's reaction to and or engagement is noted, such as, did they look at it? Did they put their hand out to reach for it? Our next preference assessment is forced choice. This is when the simultaneous presentation of 2 stimuli at one time, and the observer will record which of the 2 stimuli the client chooses. So for example, we would have a Coke and a phone, and you would choose which one you wanted. I'm really into my Coke and my phone today. Next, we have the multiple stimulus with replacement, and that is when the learner chooses a preferred stimulus from an array of 3 or more. The item chosen by the learner will remain in the array, and then the rest that are not selected will be removed and replaced. It's a lot. These last 2 are really confusing, but we're going to work through it. The last one is multiple stimulus without replacement. So the learner will choose a preferred stimulus from an array of 3 or more, similar to the previous one, but instead of the items that they chose remaining in the array, the item that they chose will be removed. So they will choose an item, it will be removed from the array, and then the order and placement of the remaining items is rearranged, and then you will start your next trial and repeat those steps over and over again. Now we're going to go into what data collection procedures could look like for your preference assessments. So for naturalistic free operant observation, the first thing you're going to do is obtain a data sheet such as the one on the side here on the screen. And then you're going to set a time to observe the client for a decent amount of time. So I would say minimum 20 minutes, but you could observe up to 60 minutes, whatever you feel like is appropriate for the client. So you're going to casually observe the client and track how the learner spends their time. And then our third step is going to be collecting the exact amount of time that the client spends with each item, listing the items that they're playing with as well. So if we look at the data form, we're going to put the date, location, the teacher, and then the child. And then under item activity, I put bubbles. So then we're going to look at the next 3. Did they approach it? You could put a check mark. Did not approach, you would put a check mark if they didn't. Did they engage with the item? Then you would put a check mark. So for example, the client ABCD went up to the bubbles, they approached it independently, and then they engaged with the item. And they engaged with that item for a total of 3 minutes and 24 seconds. So next you would have, let's see, what other things do we have? Like Coloring, item activity, you would put coloring. Well, they didn't approach it, so you would put a check mark under didn't approach, and you wouldn't need to put anything for duration of engagement because they did not engage in the item. Next, I feel like I need to move myself all over the screen. Next, we have successive choice, which is also known as single stimulus. The first step for this would be presenting an item to the client across all senses. So something they can eat, something they can smell, something they can touch, giving them a wide variety of things that, they may prefer. Next, you're going to allow the client to explore the items one at a time. So before you formally sit down and conduct this, you're going to allow them to explore with the item. Maybe they've never played with bubbles before, so you're going to show them how to work it. Maybe it's a new type of puzzle with like locks and keys. You're going to show them how it works. Then you're going to remove those items and then go back to presenting the item one at a time and note how the client is reacting and engaging with that item. Then you're going to continue to present the items multiple times in a varied order. So over on the left side of the screen, we have a mock data sheet. Again, we have the student name, the date, the data collection. You will circle if it's primary or reliability, and then you're going to put what session you are on. So for example, for the stimuli that we had for this client, we had slime, a train, a toy car, and a bear. So you're going to continue to go through and write how long the client engaged with the item in 30-second increments. So you would start your timer for 30 seconds. For the first initial 30 seconds, the client engaged with slime and a toy car. And then you're going to write the exact amount of seconds that they engaged with those items. Then you're going to go on to your next 30-second interval, which will be under that 60 seconds. So you're going 30, 60. During that interval, they played with slime and a train. You're going to write the seconds, continuing, so on and so forth. So at the end, when you're completed with it, up here in the top, you're going to see the results section. You're going to total amount of time that the client engaged with the item. And then after it is conducted, a graph of hierarchy will be constructed to determine the most preferred items. So in this scenario, the most preferred item was slime. The client played with the slime and engaged with the slime for 58 seconds, which is the most out of any other stimuli that was presented. I also wanted to make a note that there is a portion for problem behavior on this sheet. So problem behavior will be defined per client. There's not a data sheet that's going to, be a one size fit all. You can tally occurrences of problem behavior on this sheet, but also have a separate data form to track which behaviors occurred. All right, next we're on to forced choice. So forced choice is basically implemented exactly how it sounds. That is the easiest way for me to remember it. You're forcing the client to make a choice between two items. You're going to have two potential preferred items that are present at a time, and the client must choose one. Next, you're going to track which item the client chooses, and then you're going to repeat step 2 multiple times with a variety of mixed samples. At the end, items will then be ranked from highest preferred to least preferred. There's also a note on the bottom here. High preference items will have an average of 80% or more of an engagement rate, and low preference items will be 50% or less of an engagement rate. So going over to our pretend data sheet over here, we have items A through F. So that's how many? A, B, C, D, E, F, 6. I think I could count. 6 different items that we're going to be using for this preference assessment. So we have a slinky dog, goldfish, maracas, we have a stuffed animal, Coca-Cola, and a balloon. And all of those items are associated with the letter. So if you go to the bottom right here, we have the date, the child, the teacher. And then based on what the format says, so this says we are going to be evaluating whether A or B. So we would have the slinky dog and the goldfish present. During this trial, the client selected the slinky dog. Next, C and A, we have maracas versus slinky dog. During that trial, the client selected maracas. So you're going to continue to do this all the way up to 15 trials. And then at the end, over here on this side, you are going to be able to count how many times the client chose the items. Based on that data, the highest preferred to least preferred for this specific client would be maracas, slinky dog, goldfish, Coca-Cola, stuffed animal, and balloon. All right, the next one is multiple stimulus with replacement. This is where it kind of gets a little tricky and confusing, but I promise it's super easy once you learn more about it. So the first thing you're going to do is create an array of 3 or more items in front of the learner. Next, you're going to let the learner select an item. This item that they selected will stay in the array. You're going to remove every other item from the table except the chosen one and then replace that with new items. Repeat the steps until a set number of trials determined by the BCBA are completed. Over on our mock data form, this looks similar to the last one, A through H. These are all of the stimuli that were presented to the client during this time. We're working on 3 at a time. So down here, during the first trial, we have goldfish, train, and puzzle. The client chose the puzzle. So then we removed the goldfish and the train, and then we replaced those 2 items with a granola bar and a Barbie doll. Then the clients chose a puzzle. We're going to keep the puzzle in there, remove the other stimuli, and then we added the light up piano and bubbles. But then the client chose bubbles. So we're going to keep bubbles in there, remove the other stimuli, and then add some more stimuli to replace the ones that were removed. Gets confusing, but whenever you think about it, so you're replacing the items. You're replacing the items that the client did not choose. All right. Next, we have multiple stimulus without replacement. For this one, you're going to create an array of 3 or more items. In this example, we used 5 items in front of the learner. Let the learner select the item and remove the item that they selected permanently. So instead of removing items that they aren't selecting, we're going to remove the item that they do select. Then you're going to rearrange the field and let the learner select another item. You're going to continue this until there are no more items in the array. So for our data sheet, we have a total of 5 items. We have A through E. We have puzzles, 1 puzzle, bubbles, a squishy ball, a light up toy, and Cheez-Its. Looking at our data collection, we have the date, the child's name, the teacher's name, and then the first item that they selected was a squishy ball. You're going to look to the right and look in the field and choose which location the squishy ball was placed. So for the first trial, they had 5 items out. The client selected the one directly in the middle. So you're going to circle the X in the middle. So then that item is then removed. Now we have puzzle, bubbles, light up toy, and Cheez-Its. The next item they chose was a puzzle. Then you're going to circle which area in the field the puzzle was located. You're going to continue to do this until you complete as many that your BCBA assigns you to do, or whichever amount that you feel as a BCBA is appropriate for your client. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because being able to identify, if a potential preferred item is going to be preferred, the math is just a little wonky. So down here on the bottom, we have, for this example, 5 items. We have each trial number equals the amount of points for the item. Items with the lowest points equals high preferred items. Items with the highest points equals lowest preferred items. So for example, the squishy ball, trial 1, that means that that's the amount of points that a squishy ball would get. So a squishy ball gets 1 point. Item 2, a puzzle would get 2 points. Down to the Cheez-Its, that was the last preferred, it's going to get 5 points. So the sum of trials for this example is over here on the top right of the data sheet. As you can see, we are looking for the item that has the least amount of points, which that would be for C. C was a squishy ball. So squishy ball would be most likely the highest preferred item. Then you look at 10, that is the highest amount of points that we have out of all of them, and that was for Cheez-Its. So Cheez-Its are most likely the least preferred item that the client had in this preference assessment. I also found this really great visual on how to choose which preference assessment is suitable for your client. I feel like you can always think about your client and say, ooh, I feel like this preference assessment will be great, or this preference assessment, or let's just try this. But getting a visual like this and being able to answer simple yes or no questions, I felt is really valuable. So I'm going to go through this with you all and pretend like I am thinking of my client, Johnny A. So do you have an understanding of the types of items the child likes or dislikes? I would say that I do. So I'm going to say yes. Is the child able to consistently select between 2 items without choosing the same side? See, I think I'm going to go with no for that one. So the most appropriate preference assessment will be a single stimulus or free operant observation? Let's say I said yes. Then the next question will be, is the child able to select between 3 or more items without choosing the same side? I could say yes. And then I'm going to go all the way over to this next side. Does the child engage in challenging behaviors when favorite toys or items are removed? I'm going to say no for that one. So the most appropriate preference assessment for my client would be a multiple stimulus without replacement. I feel like this is a great visual to be able to help guide you in deciding which preference assessment is suitable for your client. We're already to the end. I cannot believe it. Oh my goodness. So the resource that I found to be really helpful whenever I was gathering data and information on all of this was on the evidence-based instructional practices for young children with autism and other disabilities. This is a clickable link. I'm not sure you'll be able to click it through me uploading this on YouTube, but if you just Google that title, you'll be able to find it. They have excellent resources for every preference assessment. They break them down into realistically how you conduct them and how they're useful. And also attached to all of that information are data forms that are downloadable and printable. So I did reach out, and all of the data forms that I found from this resource will be uploaded into the clinical team resources for all of the BCBAs to have access to. I hope that you all enjoyed this presentation. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing, make myself bigger. I don't know if that helped or not, but I hope you all enjoyed. And if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and let's look forward to getting some great preference assessments done.